Hello, welcome to Process Guide. In this video, we'll be looking at Bootstrap Utilities, tools that make it easy for us to write fantastic things in Bootstrap. We will be looking at display properties, and these are properties that allow us to make items visible or elements visible on the screen based on their breakpoints. We'll also be looking at margin and padding. We've been using this quite a lot. In our previous video we use it, but we will officially introduce it right here. We will be also looking at background. This allows us to be able to set background of elements, also add more complexity to it, because we will now be able to do background gradients and what have you. You will see how we can easily use shortcuts to be able to do or design very nice effects. We also have text colors. This allows you to be able to know what kind of colors are available on Bootstrap by default. Next, we have borders. This allows you to be able to change the borders of any element without you writing any style sheet. It's more of like just using the CSS. You need to know the nomenclature required to enable borders. We also introduced this in the last video, but we'll be bringing it up here in details. And finally, opacity. This is how visible or invincible you want your element to be. So you will also see how we can apply this to text and also border, even to background. Let's jump right in. From HTML, we have several forms of display. We have the grid, the flex, inline block, grid, inline grid, table, and what have you. And what we're focusing on here is how the display will be showed or will be visible based on the breakpoint, on how you can even hide it based on the breakpoint you're even looking at. In the YouTube videos we did last, you saw how we were able to remove menu from the list or from the page we were looking at. So we'll do a similar example here. So let me just put a kind of helper class to make things visible. So the two divs we have here, they are both block elements, or rather in the way they display their property is block display in their property, and you could easily change them to inline by going to the style sheet and specifying that this element should be inline, and then they will form inline. But what we're trying to target is how do you do this change without using style sheets. So the way to do that is you specify the div for display for Bootstrap. Since we're working on Bootstrap, then you specify the property that you want to make the element attain. In this case, you could use any of these examples we're using, but we'll just be focusing on three, which is inline, block, and none, and we'll demo how those things work. So let's say inline. You already know what inline does. Inline is to put side by side with the next element. So what now happens to this is that this element now becomes inline and allow the next elements to stay near it. You can see what we've been able to do. We've automatically turned a div to an inline just by specifying the requirement from Bootstrap. So the requirement is we'll have the D prefix followed by the kind of display we want it to have. In this case, it's inline. We either say we want inline or block. It will automatically take the specification you want it to take based on your requirements or what you've specified. So I'm turning this one to block, and then demo other things we need to show you. Now I've been able to do that. The next thing I want to show you is how to make it disappear or make the elements feel as if they don't exist, is by specifying none. This is the same thing we'll do if we had to specify the property by using CSS. So it just makes it so convenient that we can just go to the class and say d-none, and then it's gone away. In the previous class, I was able to tell you that you can target a specific breakpoint, meaning you can say at this breakpoint, make this element either visible or not visible. And how can you do that? Is by specifying your breakpoint in this section. So you can write your breakpoint here. So your breakpoint will sit right here, where you specify what you need to happen when that breakpoint is met. You want to hide this on all small devices. You don't want this blue marker to show on all devices. So what you need to do first is to first disable it on all devices. which is none here. And what will you now do? You will now make it visible on small device. Let's check it. So you can see that it's still visible on bigger device. So you need to stop it from being visible on the next device, and the next device is empty. So you need to stop it from going to the next device. You do d.md none. So once it gets to, is disabled on all devices. Once it gets to SM, it becomes visible. You need to stop it on the next one, which is MD. So if you go like this, it's only visible on SM. So if you go to MD, it stops being visible. Back to SM is visible. So let's go to the next example. And the next example can be, make it visible on SM and also MD. You want to be able to achieve that. If you want to be able to achieve that, you will say that make it visible on none, make it visible on where only SM, also make it visible on MD. But once it's getting to LG, make it not visible. Then you do your LG, then you say none. So if you give it a try, you see that it show only on SM and MD. So this is where your MD terminates, SM and MD. When immediately it gets to LG, it's no more visible. So you can make sure that you are seeing all these things. This block shows you that it's available on all. That's the last block that we have there. By default, you can see that it's available. But as you move along the screen, you can get to see what is visible based on the parameter you've passed in here. This is very important because it displays what it is that you need to see at some point. You know, the progression of the screen is that it goes from small to MD to LG, XL, then XXL. So you need to be able to understand that it needs to first pass one screen before going to the next screen. So you saying that it should show on all doesn't apply on everything automatically. You need to stop it where you want it to stop showing, and you need to include where you need to make it show. Let's now add another one. Let's do the opposite now. So let's now say you want it to hide only on MD. We want to hide it on small. So we want to hide on small. So you want to hide on small. So by default, is none here, or rather by default is block. Then when you now go to when you go to SM, it should be what? It should be none, because on small you don't want it to show. Now that we've said it should be showing on all, but on small is none. However, you need to let it know that it should show on the next one, which is the MD, because if you preview it this way, it will never show, because this code means that from small upward it shouldn't show. So if you write on this line 33 alone, it won't show. You need to tell it that show on the next version, which is MD, because what this one is saying is don't show on SM and above. You need to be able to say from SM, once you get to a mark, start showing, and this mark this time around is MD. So if you check this out now, it will always show on everything, but when you get to SM, it should hide. Yeah, you can see that that one is not showing anymore. We need to give it a proper coloring so that you can see the difference. So now that it's off, it's hiding. It's supposed to hide on SM. Immediately get to SM, it hides. And that's how you can use this display to target any breakpoints. You understanding the fact that once you make it visible on the smallest one, on the smallest screen, on the smallest breakpoint, it then gets visible on all the other breakpoints. So when you say none on SM, it will be none till it gets to the highest breakpoint. When you say visible on the smallest breakpoint, it will be visible on the highest breakpoint until you truncate where it should stop. If you decide that you stop from MD, it gets to stop from MD, or LG, it gets to stop from LG, like that. Okay, so let's talk about the display property. We already know this in HTML, and what this does here is to tell you how you could easily change it using the code that we have here. This is a div, which obviously you know is a block element, but you could see how we use this one line nomenclature to change it to inline, and this is by using the div prefix followed by the display property we want to assign to it. In this case, we said inline, so you could decide that it should be block, and then it attain those same way it's supposed to be. It fits in the line you want it to be. Another thing again that is very interesting is the fact that we could target a particular screen ratio or breakpoint, which is what we did in the previous video, and we're going to elaborate more here this time around so that you can follow through on what is going on. In this case, we're going to be targeting several screens, just for us to see what's going on, and this is how you write it. You put your div prefix, then followed by the breakpoint, which can be SM or MD, LG, XL, and XSL. You can put any of these breakpoints in here to determine what you want to do, but there are some rules that govern how this will work so that you can get your results and it can be painless for you to achieve. We will need to do some examples so that from those examples you'll be able to see what it is and how they are being shown. In this last one here, I'm gonna say this one is show on all. So this is to show on all screens, just to show that the whole thing is working. Just the same thing with the first one, it also shows on all screen. But how do you target a specific breakpoint? And this is where the tricky part comes in, because you have to understand how the breakpoint works. The breakpoint starts from the smallest to the highest, or highest to the smallest. When you enable the smallest breakpoint, which is SM, it can apply to the highest breakpoint. So you should know when to intersect and say, oh, I just want the smaller page to show or the smaller breakpoint to show. Then you need to stop it when you are going upward. What that means is, if you have a SM, you want a page to show on SM, you want an element to show only on SM, you will target only that SM and make sure that the next screen, which is MD, is blocked from showing the rest. So an example will give you a better understanding on what I'm talking about. So let's say you have something that says show only on SM. Show on SM. So by default, it shows on everything, and we all agree that to make it show on SM, we have to specify the breakpoint that says it should show for XM. This is the breakpoint that says show for SM alone, not alone, but show for SM. And if you check, it just does the show for XM. The other thing is that you want to disable it from showing from other things, which is where you now specify the d-none. This code allows it to disable other view from showing. However, it will not be properly implemented, or it's not that easy to disable. You have to disable the next breakpoint after SM, and the next breakpoint after SM is MD. So apart from the fact that you disable all other ones, even though you can see it's still showing, you disable other one, you need to disable the next version or the next breakpoint after SM, and that breakpoint is what is MD. So you do your d-md-none. So what this does is that it doesn't allow the screen to go past MD, because now MD is disabled. You just focus on what? SM, which you say you should show on SM. So SM is the only one that's going to show. What makes this work is the fact that you disable the next breakpoint, which is the MD. The same can apply if we keep going upward. Let's say we want this to show only on SM, so let's use the next example to demonstrate this now. And I'm going to change this color to one in here. And now in this case, we want to show only on SM and MD. So what do you think is going to happen? what's going to happen is that obviously we're not going to, block this, we're not going to block the MD this time around because we want it to show. We want our MD to show, that's the idea. But we don't want it to show till LG. We don't want it to get to LG, but you can see that even at LG, it's still showing. So based on the first explanation I said, you have to truncate your SM. SM is showing forever. You have to tell it where it will stop showing, and this time around is LG. So we then say d-lg-none. So when the screen gets to LG, it stops. So you can see this is SM and MD, these two. So immediately you get to LG, which is here. These are LG. You can see that the two are not showing anymore. Once you come here, this is show on SM and MD. So anytime you get to LG, it goes off. So the example is like that. So let's go ahead and do the opposite and show a screen that only shows on LG. Let's go ahead to do a screen that only shows on LG. Show only on LG. And let's see how we're going to do that. Now to do that is you don't want to display on anything. You then also want to display LG to be blocked because that's what we're targeting. However, we don't want it to show on anything lower than LG. Very important. Anything lower than LG, you don't want it to show, because if you leave it like this, just for you to see what is going on, let's also change the color. If you leave it like this, it will show on LG and above. So it will show only on LG and above. And the reason why it's showing and above is the same reason that we talked about previously. We need to stop the next version from showing, because the intention here is only to show for LG alone. So how do you stop the next breakpoint? The next breakpoint is XL. Then you do D XL none. So when it sees XL, it's not going to show for that. And you can see what happened. So we have this dynamic view which is in play that you can see now, and this is based on whatever you want to do. Obviously most of the time you won't have this dynamism, you just target a specific screen. So based on the screen you want to target, you are going to write that, and you can see how I'm making some content available or not available based on the screen I want to target. So you need to do a lot of practice here to see, to understand this more. And all this documentation is also on the website for Bootstrap, and you can see it's clearly there. Up next is our margin and padding. This is pretty easy and we will not spend too much time here. So quickly, let's look at how it is. We just bring a fancy div here. And I think I'm going to also take this together with border, since it has a visual effect, so I can demonstrate both of them at the same time. So I'll start with border first, and what border does obviously is to add border to your elements. I will show you how that works. We introduced that in our previous video. The first thing here is to add the border class, and once you've done that, the border will appear there just for me to show you that it's showing. So you have the border right there, which is displaying in there. You have the border visible, but of course there are so many effects that you can have to the border, which I will be demonstrating. You can also have border in terms of the radius, how large it is. I think the maximum is 5 or thereabout. Yeah, it's 5. So the maximum is 5. You can also have the opacity, which we'll talk about it later, but since it is border, you can set the opacity in terms of how bright or how translucent the border is. So you can check that and it will give you a different opacity based on the setting that you've chosen. So even though this is not everything we'll have on that border, we will work on it as we continue. So we have our border there and the border radius. The next thing I want to talk about is the margin. I want to jump to the margin now and padding. You obviously know where the margin applies to. The margin happens after the border. That's where the margin happens. And the padding happens before the border. So there are quite some nomenclature or some prefix I need to introduce to you so that you get to see what's going on. And this prefix apply to other elements or properties in Bootstrap. So we have the E, we have the P denoting the padding, and we have the M denoting margin. So the P prefix M margin denoting that. So that means if I want to add the padding, I just denote P followed by the number of padding I want to add to it. I just added 5 padding, 5 to up, right, left, and bottom. So what if I want to target the left side or the top side, right or bottom? How do we target that? They also have prefix, and those prefix are as follows. To target the top, you just use T for top, and this also applies to the margin. To target bottom, you use B for bottom. You also have E for end, or let's say start, S for start. That's the left side of the margin or padding. Then you have E for end, which is the right side of the padding or margin. So to demonstrate this now, let's have different setup for this. Let's say we want to have P starts, meaning the beginning, to be 4. You can see immediately it's being applied. Then the P top to be 5. Then P right, even though we won't see P right, let's just jump to P bottom. P bottom to be 2 or 3. So there we go, we have that set. So you can see the shortcut in which you can use to apply your padding across your element. Let's now implement the margin, which is relatively the same from what we are doing. Instead, this time around we just use M. So if you use M-5, it gives you this effect. So you can use the same thing we just talked about in the padding to have this other effect that you want, if you want to specify each of the section or segments of the elements. The other thing I wanted to talk about again about the border is the border radius, which we discussed in the previous video. So this concludes for margin and padding. We can still talk about some other elements that we have, or some other properties that we have under the border, and that is when you talk about rounding the edges, more like border radius. Even though this same style can be added to the image, but since we are talking about border, you can also have rounded edges, which is under a class called rounded. So once you do that, it attach a very small rounded area to it, but you can specify how rounded it should be by saying rounded dash, not a number. I think it also ends as 5. It will give you that kind of effect. We could also target a specific area of the edges. We could target the left, bottom, right side of it by using rounded top if you want to target the top part of it. And when you specify a value, you get to see those values on that image. So you could do quite a lot on this section. We discussed this in the previous video. Go to background. I'm going to highlight background so that we know where we are in the video. Even though I'm still leaving the borders not completed, because we can still do a lot of things under the border, but I want to introduce the background first, because that tells us more about colors and what have you. You get to see the colors that we have, even though we've been using colors, but this is now an official introduction to the coloring system on Bootstrap. There are 8 colors in Bootstrap, 8 major colors that you could play around with to give you the results that you are trying to work with. And this is by default. Everything that we are talking about in terms of the styling can be modified based on what you want to attain. So we have the secondary color, or rather primary color, we have secondary, we have the success. These are the nomenclature used in Bootstrap, and they denote what results or what task you are currently doing. So we have danger, we have warning, we have info, we have light, we have dark. These are all the colors that we have, these are the colors that we have, and you can use them to achieve major things in your project. So when you want to use any of this color, you can set them as a text color, border color, or background color. Notice the places that you use these colors. I think 3 major places you use colors. You use it in the border, you use it in text, and you use it in the background. So you can use it to achieve so many things on the system. So let's see, how do we apply a color to a text? How do you apply it to a background? How do you apply it to a border? That's what I'm about to show now. And that means that we are even mixing this one together with this, because now we are going to be talking also about text. So we are talking about text color, background color, and border color. So we are starting with text first. To apply any color to a text, you just specify text dash the color, because you are concerned about text. So how do you apply a danger color to this now? For example, you just do text dash danger, which I've been using. That's what I've been using to specify this all along. That's what I used to specify that this first one is danger, this one is danger, this one is danger. So meaning you have that red color. We could specify other colors by just having their nomenclature here, their name that are being called. You can specify it here and you get to see those colors appear. So success is kind of a green, and you have your light, which you might want to use depending on the kind of theme you're working in, and we also have our dark. So those are the colors that you have. There you have other ones. You can also experiment by yourself to give you the color that you want. This is for text. What about how do you now get for background? Very easy. You've also seen me use it. Your background can be denoted by using the BG prefix. Once you use your BG prefix, you have that effect. So you can denote for any of this: BG info, BG light, warning, primary. You get all these effects. And there's now another one as well, ability for you to combine the text and the background. Because look at this now, you have this is not showing too well, because those colors are not playing too well, and you maybe want the text to be brighter. Then you might have to now start doing this. So if you do this, for example, you're writing more, but Bootstrap has thought about this and brought a way where you can merge these two things together. How do you do that? You can tell it to bring out a text and a background color that complement each other by doing what we call text and BG, meaning combine the text and the BG and make the background primary, and specify the text that will go with the primary color, and you have this. So if you say danger, what text will go with danger? It will automatically bring it for you. Let's try dark. Obviously we should be expecting a white text. Let's try light. We should be expecting a black text. So there you go. Let's try warning. Warning also comes with a white text. Finally, let's try success. We have that also in place. So we've been able to look at text and background, so that's BG, and combine. Finally, we go to border. How do we specify the color of a border? So let's disable this one that we have so that we can focus on just continue with our border now that we've introduced colors. To specify the color of your border, you just specify border dash the color name. You could use success, since we use success here, and you can see what happened. this is the border that we have, but let's change this to primary, or let's change to light, and then we can see your border coming out all nicely. This is how you can specify the border, and you can specify the border of each section. If you want to specify border for a particular section of the screen, maybe you don't want to specify it for all the whole part, you can decide which part you want to add those border to. So this way you are targeting a particular part of the border or part of the coloring, only a specific part. You can even specify, we already did this, specifying the width of the border 4. Then you can specify which border you want to remove, or you want to disable, or you want to change the width by saying, let's change the width of the left hand side of the border. Say border, which is start, then you say 0, meaning it should start, the border on the start section, which should be 0. We also want to change the border on the right hand side, which is the border end. You also want it to be 0. You want to leave it like this. If you want to leave it like this, that's fine. Then you can change the border to be 2. So let's go to opacity and see how it works. Let's use danger. Opacity has a class which you have to use, and it goes with number, because opacity is the level of visibility of the elements from 0 to 100%. So you have to use opacity dash 100 like this, meaning 100%. That's by default. This is the status of all elements. They are bright, into 100%. Then you have 75, you have 50, and you have 25. Those are the numbers. Even though we have other ones, we also have 0. So we can test out this and see what we have. So if we remove all this that we have here, let's just focus on, let me make this 4. Make this border red. Okay, so in order to make our opacity works, we just put opacity and we specify the level of percentage that we want to implement. So you can see the difference. Once you implement 75%, you see what happens to it. So you can also specify 25, and you can see the results that you have. But notice the difference. What you have here, the opacity is applied to the whole element. We could also apply opacity to the background. That way it just works only for the background and it doesn't affect the text as well. This is affecting the text, what you have here. So if you apply to the background, you can see the difference. It applied to the background and nothing affects the border. The border is intact. It doesn't worry about the border. Let me make the text. Let me make the text dark. So you can see that there. Then there's also opacity along the border, which I mentioned. So we have that set. That's how the opacity works. You can set background opacity. You can set the element opacity by just specifying opacity like that. So let's move on to the final thing that we'll have here, and that is our shadow. The shadow is very interesting because it makes your elements look serious. We have our shadow, which has a class called shadow, obviously, and these also have some prefix that you can add to them. You can say a shadow has a very small area to cover, or it has a very large area, like a footprint. So when you see us demo it, you will get to see how it is. So there's a regular shadow, there's a small shadow, and then there's a shadow that has a large footprint. Let's get to add a shadow to this and see what we have. So if you just add the class name shadow to this, and you can see the results that we have. So we have shadow spelled this way. So you should be able to see the results right now. You should see the results right now. So you can see that differences. You can see the shadow you have there. Let's have different elements so that we can have different shadow display. So I have this and call this our regular shadow. This is a shadow this way. I'm gonna have 4 of this or 3 of this. So let me remove things that I don't need. Okay, let's try all the shadows that we have here. Let's make this 4. Let's make this 4. And let's make this 4. So we have shadow. Let's try shadow with SM. And if you look at it, you have a very low footprint. You can barely see the shadow on this second item here. You can barely see the shadow. So let's see the next one, which is large, shadow large. So this is a large one, and you can see the difference. So the SM barely registers as a shadow, but if it's the effect you're looking for, you are gonna see your results that way. So let me make it more dramatic by removing those border sign, and you can see the effect that is visible. Once you remove the border, you will be able to see some form of shadow coming up. Yeah, so those shadow is coming up now. Once I remove the border, it's more pronounced right now. So this should give you an idea of what's going on. Let me remove the border on everything. Okay, so this now gives you an idea of what's going on. The first one there is your shadow, your regular shadow. Then this is a small shadow. Then the last one is the large shadow. Which do you prefer? I think I like the regular shadow better. But of course, depending on what you're trying to do, you will get the feel of it. So do something with these shadows. I think they are looking very nice. There are a lot of things you can do with this. One of the cool things you can do with shadow is when you have your card. When you have card designed and your content on the bottom, you can have a very nice shadow and it's gonna look great. As a bonus, I'm just gonna throw image into that place so that we can see how nice it will look like. Let's throw image into our shadow section and see what happens to it. Thank you for staying to the end. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and turn on bell notification in order to be notified when we release new videos. See you in the next one.